I stood in my parents' kitchen house keys clutched in my trembling hand, watching their faces transform from confusion to pure rage. I had just told them the news I thought would make them proud. I had finally done it. After 5 years of saving every penny, I had just closed on my dream house, a beautiful 2-bedroom ranch in suburban Denver. But instead of congratulations, my mother's voice cut through the silence like a blade. How could you be so selfish when Madison needs help getting established? My father stepped forward, his face red with anger. We're done with you if you don't fix this right now. The silence that followed my father's threat felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I looked between my parents, searching their faces for any trace of the pride I'd expected to see. Instead, I found only disappointment and fury. My mother crossed her arms, shaking her head slowly as if I had just confessed to a crime. "Herbert, we raised you better than this," she said, her voice dripping with accusation. "Family comes first, always." I set the keys down on the granite countertop they had installed just 2 years ago, paid for with money I had lent them when their own finances got tight. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was being lectured about family priorities in a kitchen I had helped fund. "I don't understand," I said, though deep down, I was beginning to understand perfectly. "Why aren't you happy for me? I've worked so hard for this." My father let out a bitter laugh. "Worked hard? You mean you've been selfish? Your sister needs our support right now, and instead of helping her, you go behind our backs and buy yourself a house." The words hit me like a physical blow. Behind their backs, I had been dreaming about this house for months, talking about my savings plan, sharing my excitement about finally being able to afford something of my own. How had my achievement become a betrayal? "I've been saving for this house for 5 years. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I told you about my plan. I've been living with 3 roommates in that tiny apartment, driving my beat-up Honda, eating ramen noodles for dinner so I could save every dollar. And we thought you were being responsible so you could help your sister when she needed it," my mother snapped. "Madison is just starting out. She needs guidance and financial support. You've always been the stable one." There it was. The truth I had been avoiding my entire adult life. I wasn't their son. I was their backup plan, their insurance policy, their reliable source of emergency funds whenever Madison needed something she couldn't afford on her own. I thought back to when I was 14, working weekends at the local grocery store, bagging groceries, and collecting shopping carts from the parking lot. While I was learning the value of hard work, Madison was taking private dance lessons that cost $200 a month. When I asked if I could take guitar lessons, my parents explained that money was tight and I needed to understand that some things were luxuries we couldn't afford. But Madison's dance lessons weren't luxuries. They were investments in her future, her happiness, her dreams. When college applications came around, the pattern continued. I applied to the local community college and found a full-time job at a warehouse to pay for my classes and help with household expenses. Madison got into a private university 3 states away, and my parents somehow found the money for her full tuition room and board. $48,000 a year for 4 years. Nearly $200,000 total. We believe in Madison's potential. My father had explained when I asked how they could afford it. She's studying communications and marketing. She's going to do great things. I transferred to a 4-year school eventually, but only after earning my associate degree while working 40 hours a week. I paid my own way through everything, graduating with a business degree and no debt, while Madison graduated with a communications degree and no real-world experience. Even after college, the expectations continued. When Madison needed help with her security deposit for her first apartment, guess who got the call? When her car broke down and needed $3,000 in repairs, guess who was expected to step up? When she wanted to take a 2-week vacation to Europe but couldn't afford it, guess who was asked to help family pursue their dreams? Every time I said yes. Every time I told myself it was temporary. Every time I believed that eventually Madison would get on her feet and start contributing to the family instead of just taking from it. I've given Madison over $15,000 in the past 3 years. I said, the calculation hitting me like a revelation. Security deposits, car repairs, credit card payments, emergency expenses. When does it end? It doesn't end, my mother said matter-of-factly. That's what family means. We support each other. But who supports me? The question came out louder than I intended, filled with 28 years of suppressed frustration. When have either of you ever supported me? When have you ever celebrated my achievements or helped me with my goals? My father's expression darkened. We don't support you because you don't need support. You've always been independent. Madison needs more help because she's more sensitive, more creative. She needs time to find her path. More sensitive. More creative. These were the code words my parents had always used to justify Madison's special treatment. She was the artist, the dreamer, the one who needed protection from the harsh realities of the world. I was the practical one, the responsible one, the one who could handle anything life threw at me. But what they never understood was that their labels had become my prison. By deciding I was strong enough to handle everything they had denied me, the right to be vulnerable, to need help, to make mistakes. I had been forced to be an adult since childhood, while Madison was allowed to remain a child well into her 20s. Madison is 26 years old, I said, my voice growing stronger. At what point does being sensitive and creative become an excuse for being irresponsible? Don't you dare talk about your sister that way, my mother warned. She's trying her best. And what about my best? I asked. I've been trying my best for 28 years. I've been responsible for 28 years. I've been sacrificing for 28 years. And the one time I do something for myself, something I've worked and saved and planned for, you act like I've committed a crime. The kitchen fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. For the first time in my life, I had pushed back against their expectations. For the first time, I had demanded to be seen as something other than Madison's support system. My mother's phone buzzed and she glanced at it quickly. Her expression changed and she looked up at me with renewed anger. Madison just texted me, she said. She's been counting on your help for her house down payment. She's been planning on it for months. The words hit me like a truck. Planning on it? What do you mean planning on it? We told her you'd help her buy a house, my father said, as if this should be obvious. She's been looking at properties, working with a realtor. She found a perfect place and she needs $18,000 for the down payment. I stared at them in disbelief. You promised her my money without asking me. We didn't promise your money, my mother said defensively. We promised our family's support, and you're part of this family. But that was exactly what they had done. They had promised my money, my savings, my 5 years of sacrifice and careful planning. They had treated my financial resources as their own family fund available for distribution according to their priorities. What else? I asked quietly. What else have you promised her using my money? The look that passed between my parents told me everything I needed to know. This was bigger than just a house down payment. This was a comprehensive plan for my future financial obligations, all arranged without my knowledge or consent. We need to talk, my father said finally. There are things you need to understand about your responsibilities to this family. As I looked at their faces, I realized that this conversation was going to change everything. For better or worse, the truth was finally going to come out. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what I was about to learn. My parents exchanged another look, the kind of silent communication that comes from 30 years of marriage and shared secrets. My stomach churned as I waited for them to explain what other commitments they had made, using my bank account as collateral. Sit down, my mother said, gesturing toward the kitchen table where I'd done homework as a child and later helped plan Madison's graduation party and birthday celebrations. This is bigger than just the house. I remained standing, crossing my arms. Tell me now, what else have you promised her? My father cleared his throat suddenly, unable to meet my eyes. Madison is going to need help getting established in life. She's not like you, Herbert. She doesn't have your natural ability with money and planning. That's not an answer, I said firmly. What specific promises have you made? My mother opened a drawer and pulled out a small notebook. She flipped through several pages before finding what she was looking for. The fact that they had written this down, that they had made lists and plans for spending my money, made my hands shake with anger. Madison's wedding fund. She began reading from the notebook. We estimated she'll need about $25,000 when she gets married. Most of that would come from you since you'll be financially established by then. Madison isn't even dating anyone seriously, I said incredulous. She will be, my father said confidently. She's a beautiful, intelligent young woman. When the right man comes along, she'll want a proper wedding. Family helps with weddings. My mother continued reading. Future Children's College Funds. We calculated that you'd be able to contribute about $10,000 per child to help with educational expenses. Children that don't exist for a wedding that isn't planned to a man she hasn't met? I said slowly, making sure I understood the scope of their fantasy. You've planned out my financial obligations for the next 20 years based on completely hypothetical situations. They're not hypothetical, my mother insisted. They're life events that will happen. Madison will get married, have children, need our support. And since you're the one with the steady income and the financial skills, you'll be in the best position to help. What else is on that list? I asked, dreading the answer. Business startup costs, my father said. Madison has always been entrepreneurial. She has ideas for her own marketing company, maybe an event planning business, something creative that suits her personality. She'll need capital to get started. How much capital? I asked. $30,000 to $40,000, my mother said casually as if this were pocket change. Just to get her started. Once the business is successful, she'll be able to pay it back. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just like she's paid back all the other money I've given her. Those weren't loans, my father said. Those were family support. There's a difference. Not to my bank account, there isn't, I shot back. The sound of a car door slamming outside interrupted our conversation. Through the window, I could see Madison's silver sedan in the driveway, the one I'd helped her buy when her previous car died 2 years ago. She's here, my mother said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. Good. You two need to talk this out. The front door opened and Madison's voice echoed through the house. Mom, Dad, I saw Herbert's car outside. Is he here about the house? She appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I was struck by how polished she looked. Her hair was freshly styled, her makeup perfectly applied, and she was wearing a designer jacket I didn't recognize. For someone who supposedly needed financial help, she certainly didn't look like she was struggling. Herbert, she said, smiling brightly. Congratulations on the house. I'm so excited that we're finally going to be neighbors. Neighbors, I asked, confused. The house I'm buying is just 6 blocks from yours, she explained, setting her purse down on the counter. I found the most adorable craftsman bungalow. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, gorgeous hardwood floors. The realtor says it's a great investment property. I looked back and forth between Madison and our parents. You already picked out a house? Of course, she said, as if this were obvious. I've been working with Jennifer Patterson for 3 months now. She's the best realtor in the area. We've looked at probably 20 houses before finding the perfect one. And how exactly were you planning to pay for this house? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Madison's smile faltered slightly. Well, with family help, obviously. Mom and Dad explained that you'd be contributing to the down payment as part of our family investment strategy. Family investment strategy, I repeated slowly. And what was I supposed to get out of this investment? The satisfaction of helping your sister achieve her dreams? My father said, as if this were payment enough. And the knowledge that you're building strong family bonds that will last a lifetime. Madison pulled out her phone and began scrolling through photos. Look, I took pictures of the house. Isn't it beautiful? The kitchen has been completely renovated and there's a gorgeous garden in the backyard. I'm planning to host family dinners there once I'm settled in. She held her phone out to me, showing me pictures of a house that was clearly worth far more than anything I could afford. The kitchen alone looked like it had $50,000 worth of renovations. How much does this house cost? I asked. $285,000, Madison said proudly. It's at the top of my budget, but Jennifer says it's worth every penny. The neighborhood is really up and coming. I did quick math in my head. So you need about $57,000 for a 20% down payment. Well, I'm putting down 10%, Madison corrected. So I need about $28,000. Plus closing costs and moving expenses, probably another $8,000. $36,000, I said. You expect me to give you $36,000 so you can buy a house that costs twice as much as mine? It's not giving, my mother interjected. It's investing in family, and Madison's house will appreciate faster because of the neighborhood. Have you been pre-approved for a mortgage? I asked Madison. Do you have steady income to qualify for a loan? Madison's smile disappeared completely. That's being worked out, she said vaguely. What does that mean exactly? I pressed. It means she's been responsible and saved what she could, but she needs family support to make her dreams come true, my father said. Just like family should do. But something in Madison's expression told me there was more to the story. She was avoiding my eyes, fidgeting with her phone, and I could see the beginnings of panic in her face. Madison, I said carefully, what's your current employment situation? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. My parents both turned to look at Madison, and I could see they were expecting her to give a simple, straightforward answer about her marketing job at the tech company downtown. Instead, Madison's face crumpled and she burst into tears. It's complicated, she sobbed. The company was downsizing and my position was eliminated. But it's not my fault. They were cutting the entire marketing department. When did this happen? My mother asked, reaching out to comfort Madison. 6 months ago, Madison whispered. 6 months. She had been unemployed for 6 months, looking at houses, making plans to buy property, and expecting me to fund her dreams while she had no income at all. What have you been living on for 6 months? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. Savings, Madison said quickly, and some help from mom and dad, and credit cards for emergencies. How much credit card debt do you have? I asked. Madison's crying intensified. I don't know exactly. I haven't added it all up. It's not that much. But the way she said it, the way she couldn't meet my eyes, told me it was much more than she was admitting. And suddenly, all the pieces of my family's financial puzzle began falling into place. Madison wasn't just asking for help with a house down payment. She was drowning and they expected me to be her life raft. Again. The sound of Madison sobbing filled the kitchen, but for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to comfort her. Instead, I pulled out a chair and sat down facing her with the kind of serious expression I usually reserve for difficult conversations at work. Madison, I said firmly, I need you to tell me the truth, all of it. How much credit card debt do you have? She looked to our parents for support, but my father was staring at the floor and my mother was wringing her hands nervously. It was clear they had known more than they were letting on. It's not that bad, Madison said through her tears. Maybe $15,000. That's normal for someone my age. $15,000, I repeated, and you've been unemployed for 6 months. I've been looking for work, she said defensively. But the job market is terrible right now. Companies want people with more experience. What kind of work are you looking for? I asked. Marketing positions, obviously. That's what my degree is in. But everyone wants 5 years of experience for entry-level positions. It's impossible. I pulled out my phone and opened a job search website. Within 30 seconds, I found 6 marketing positions in our city, 3 of them specifically labeled as entry-level. These positions don't require 5 years of experience, I said, showing her my screen. This one requires 6 months to 1 year. This one says they're willing to train the right candidate. Madison glanced at my phone dismissively. Those aren't real marketing jobs. They're sales positions disguised as marketing. I'm not going to work in some boiler room making cold calls. So you'd rather have no income at all than take a job that might be beneath your expectations? I asked. That's not fair, my mother interrupted. Madison has standards. She worked hard for her degree. She shouldn't have to settle for just any job. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, she's been unemployed for 6 months and has $15,000 in credit card debt. At what point do standards become excuses? Madison's phone started ringing and she glanced at it nervously before declining the call. 30 seconds later, it rang again. And again. Who's calling you? I asked. Nobody important, Madison said, quickly declining another call. But when the phone rang for the 4th time in 2 minutes, my father reached over and grabbed it before Madison could stop him. He looked at the caller ID and his face went white. Capital One Collections on, he read aloud. Madison lunged for the phone, but it was too late. The truth was out. It's just one credit card, she said desperately. And I'm working out a payment plan with them. How much do you owe Capital One? I asked. Madison was silent. Madison, my father said sternly, answer your brother. $8,000, she whispered. And you said your total debt was $15,000, I said. So you have $7,000 on other cards. Madison's silence stretched on until my mother finally spoke up. Madison, honey, you need to tell us everything. We can't help you if we don't know the full situation. $28,000, Madison finally admitted. I owe $28,000 across 6 different credit cards. The number hit me like a physical blow. $28,000 in credit card debt, no income, and she was planning to buy a house. The mathematical impossibility of her situation was staggering. And our parents knew about this, I asked, looking between Mom and Dad. We knew she was having some financial difficulties, my mother said carefully. But we didn't know it was quite so extensive. Did you co-sign for any of these credit cards? I asked. My parents exchanged another look and my stomach dropped. Just one, my father said. She needed help establishing credit when she graduated from college. Which card? I asked. The first Capital One card, Madison said quietly. The one with $8,000 on it. So my parents were legally responsible for $8,000 of Madison's debt. And given their limited income from Dad's pension and Mom's part-time job at the library, they couldn't possibly pay it back without help. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it, expecting something from work, but instead saw a message from an unknown number. This is Capital One calling for Herbert Johnson regarding account number ending in 4756. Please call us back at your earliest convenience. I stared at the message, confused. Why is Capital One calling me about Madison's debt? Madison's face went even paler if that was possible. Madison. I said slowly, did you use my information when you applied for credit cards? Just as a reference, she said quickly. They wanted employment information and references. I didn't think it would matter. What kind of reference? I pressed. Emergency contact information. And maybe I mentioned where you worked when they asked about family income. I could feel my blood pressure rising. Did you list me as a co-applicant on any of these cards? Madison's silence was answer enough. I immediately called Capital One's customer service line. After navigating through the phone tree and providing my social security number, I was connected to a representative who confirmed my worst fears. Mr. Johnson, you're listed as a co-applicant on account ending in 4756. The account is currently 67 days past due with a balance of $8,432. Your credit score has been impacted by the missed payments. I hung up the phone and looked at Madison with a mixture of shock and fury. You put me as a co-applicant without asking me, I said. You've damaged my credit with your missed payments. I was going to fix it, Madison said desperately. I just needed some time to get back on my feet. How? I asked. How are you going to fix it with no income and no job prospects you're willing to consider? I thought you would help me, she admitted. I thought family would help family. There it was again. The family obligation card. The assumption that my money, my credit, my financial future were all community property to be used for Madison's benefit. What other accounts am I listed on? I asked. Just that one, Madison said, but she couldn't look me in the eye. I spent the next hour on the phone with various credit card companies, discovering that Madison had listed me as an emergency contact on all 6 cards and had provided my employment information when asked about household income. While I wasn't legally responsible for most of the debt, my personal information was scattered across her financial mess, like breadcrumbs leading back to me. By the time I finished making calls, my parents and Madison had moved to the living room, where they were having what appeared to be a heated discussion in whispers. When I joined them, the conversation stopped abruptly. We've been talking, my mother said carefully, and we think there's a solution that could work for everyone. I waited for her to continue, though I already suspected I wouldn't like what was coming next. If you could help Madison with her debt and the house down payment, my father said she could get a fresh start, clean slate, and then she'd be in a position to find good employment and pay you back over time. You want me to give her $64,000, I said flatly. $28,000 for debt plus $36,000 for the house. It's an investment in her future, my mother insisted. And in your relationship with your sister? I looked at Madison, who was sitting on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For the first time since this conversation began, I really looked at her. I noticed the designer handbag sitting beside her, the expensive shoes, the professionally styled hair, the manicured nails. Madison, I said quietly, how much did that handbag cost? She glanced at the bag and then back at me. It was a gift, she said. From who? I bought it for myself, she admitted. When I thought I was going to get the new job at Peterson Marketing, it was supposed to be a celebration. How much? I asked again. $400, she whispered. $400 for a handbag while $28,000 in debt and unemployed. The financial disconnect was mind-boggling. And the shoes, $200. Hair appointment, $150, but that was 2 weeks ago. I added it up quickly. In the past month, while knowing she was in serious financial trouble, Madison had spent at least $750 on luxuries. That was more than many people spent on groceries for an entire month. Do you see the problem here? I asked. You're asking me to give you $64,000 while you're still spending money on designer handbags and expensive hair appointments. Those were necessities, Madison protested. I need to look professional for job interviews. Have you had any job interviews in the past month? I asked. Madison's silence told me everything I needed to know. As I sat there looking at my family, I realized that this wasn't just about money. This was about a fundamental disconnect between reality and expectations. Madison had been living in a fantasy world where her problems would always be solved by someone else, where her wants were more important than her needs, and where family meant never having to face consequences for poor decisions. And my parents had enabled this fantasy every step of the way. My phone buzzed again. Another message from a debt collector this time, looking for Madison, but using my contact information. As I stared at the message, I realized that Madison's financial crisis was about to become my crisis, unless I took immediate action to protect myself. The question was, how far was my family willing to go to make their problems mine? The next morning, I took a personal day from work and drove to the office of Patricia Reynolds, a financial attorney recommended by my bank. I'd spent the night researching my legal exposure and realized that Madison's use of my personal information could have consequences I hadn't even begun to understand. Patricia was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who listened carefully as I explained the situation. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions that made my stomach churn. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said after I finished. Your sister used your name as a co-applicant on at least one credit card without your knowledge or permission. Correct. She provided your employment information to multiple credit card companies when applying for additional cards. Yes. And she used your phone number and potentially your address as contact information for these accounts. That's right. Patricia set down her pen and looked at me seriously. Herbert, what your sister has done constitutes identity theft and fraud. These are federal crimes. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I'd been thinking of Madison's actions as irresponsible and selfish, but I hadn't considered that they might actually be criminal. What does that mean for me? I asked. First, we need to do a complete audit of your credit report and financial accounts to see the full extent of the damage. Then, we need to file reports with the credit bureaus and potentially with law enforcement, depending on what we find. Patricia pulled up my credit report on her computer, and what we discovered made my head spin. In addition to the Capital One card, I knew about my name appeared in connection with 2 other accounts that had been opened in the past 18 months. Both accounts had missed payments and both were affecting my credit score. I never applied for these accounts, I said, staring at the screen in disbelief. But someone did using your personal information, Patricia said grimly. And that someone had access to enough details about your life to successfully impersonate you. We spent the next 2 hours going through my financial records, line by line. Patricia helped me identify several suspicious charges and inquiries that I hadn't noticed before. Someone had been monitoring my credit and using my information far more extensively than I had realized. There's more, Patricia said, pulling up another section of my credit report. You're listed as an authorized user on a Bank of America account with a balance of $12,000. That's impossible, I said. I don't have any Bank of America accounts. But there it was clear as day. According to the credit reporting agency, I had authorized access to an account that was currently in default. The missed payments were dragging down my credit score month after month. We need to contact Bank of America immediately, Patricia said. This is a serious breach. While Patricia made phone calls to various financial institutions, I sat in her office, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. Madison hadn't just used my name as a reference. She had systematically stolen my identity to fund her lifestyle for over a year. My phone rang and I saw my mother's name on the screen. I considered not answering, but I knew this conversation was inevitable. Herbert, my mother said without preamble, where are you? Madison is beside herself. She says you're threatening to have her arrested. I haven't threatened anyone with anything, I said calmly. But I am discovering that Madison's financial problems are much worse than any of us knew. She made some mistakes, my mother admitted. But she's family. We work these things out within the family. Mom, I said carefully, using someone else's social security number and personal information to open credit accounts is identity theft. It's a federal crime. Don't be so dramatic, my mother said dismissively. She's your sister. She wasn't trying to hurt you. But she did hurt me, I replied. My credit score has dropped 60 points because of accounts I never opened and payments I never missed. That can be fixed, my mother insisted. Once Madison gets back on her feet, she'll take care of everything. I looked at Patricia, who was shaking her head and making throat-cutting gestures. Clearly, she had heard these kinds of family justifications before. Mom, I have to go, I said. I'm in a meeting with an attorney. An attorney? My mother's voice rose in panic. Herbert, you cannot involve lawyers in family business. Think about what this will do to Madison's future. I'm thinking about what this will do to my future, I said and hung up. Patricia returned to her desk with a stack of printed documents. I've been on the phone with Bank of America, she said. The account in question was opened using a joint application with your sister as the primary holder and you as an authorized user. The application includes a forged signature that's supposed to be yours. Can you prove it's forged? I asked. We'll have a handwriting expert analyze it. But yes, I believe we can prove fraud, she said. The question is what you want to do about it. What are my options? You can file a police report for identity theft, which would start a criminal investigation. You can dispute the charges with the credit bureaus, which would remove them from your credit report, but might not address the criminal aspect. Or you can try to work this out privately with your family, though I strongly advise against that option. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. This time it was my father. Herbert, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Your mother tells me you're talking to lawyers about Madison. I want you to think very carefully about what you're doing here. What I'm doing is protecting myself from financial fraud, I said. What you're doing is destroying your sister's life over money, he shot back. Madison is young and made some poor decisions. But if you involve the police, she could face criminal charges. Do you want to be responsible for sending your sister to jail? The guilt trip was expertly delivered, and I could feel my resolve wavering. This was my family, the people who had raised me and loved me. But then I looked at Patricia, who was holding up a document showing where my signature had been forged, and I remembered that love shouldn't include identity theft. Dad, I said slowly, Madison committed crimes, multiple felonies. The fact that she's my sister doesn't make those crimes disappear. If you do this, my father said quietly, you'll no longer be part of this family. Your mother and I will not support you in destroying Madison's future. And if I don't do this, I replied, Madison will destroy my future. She's already damaged my credit-opened accounts in my name and made me liable for thousands of dollars in debt I never agreed to take on. We'll pay you back, my father promised. Whatever it takes, we'll make this right. How? I asked. Your retired mom works part-time, and you've already refinanced your house to help Madison before. Where exactly is this money going to come from? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. My parents had no plan to pay me back because they had no means to pay me back. They were asking me to absorb the financial damage and trust that somehow, magically, everything would work out. After I hung up Patricia and I continued reviewing the financial documents, what we discovered made the phone calls from my parents seem almost quaint. Herbert, Patricia said carefully, there's something else we need to discuss. I found a mortgage application that was submitted to 3 different banks last month. Madison's mortgage application for the house she wants to buy. No, Patricia said grimly. A mortgage application for your house, the one you just bought. I stared at her in confusion. That's impossible. I own my house outright. I paid cash. According to this application, you're applying for a home equity loan for $85,000 using your house as collateral. Patricia turned her computer screen toward me, and I saw my name, my address, my social security number, and my employment information on a loan application I had never seen before. Look at the signature line, she said. I looked and my blood ran cold. Someone had forged my signature on a loan application that would put my house at risk. Madison has been planning to mortgage my house to pay for her debts and her down payment. I said slowly, the full scope of her scheme becoming clear. That appears to be the case, Patricia confirmed. If this loan had been approved, you would have been legally obligated to repay $85,000 with your house as collateral. I felt sick. Madison hadn't just stolen my identity for credit cards. She had tried to steal my house. What happens now? I asked. Now we document everything and file a comprehensive police report, Patricia said. This has gone far beyond family financial disputes. This is organized fraud, and it needs to be treated as such. As I sat in Patricia's office signing forms and authorizing investigations, I realized that my family had forced me into a position I never wanted to be in. I was about to file criminal charges against my own sister, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because she had left me no choice. The Herbert who had walked into this office that morning still believed that family problems could be solved with love and communication. The Herbert who was about to leave understood that sometimes protecting yourself requires treating family like strangers. And that realization broke my heart in ways I never thought possible. The police station felt cold and sterile as I sat across from Detective Sarah Martinez, a financial crimes specialist who had seen cases like mine more often than I would have imagined. She reviewed the documentation Patricia had helped me prepare, occasionally asking questions that forced me to confront the full scope of Madison's deception. Identity theft between family members is more common than people realize, Detective Martinez explained. Family members have access to personal information and often have a sense of entitlement to each other's resources that makes them feel justified in their actions. How long does an investigation like this usually take? I asked. Several months, possibly longer, if we need to subpoena bank records and credit card statements, she said. But we can start protective measures immediately. First step is getting fraud alerts placed on all your credit reports. While Detective Martinez filed the initial report, I spent an hour on the phone with credit bureaus, banks, and monitoring services. By the end of the day, I had frozen my credit, changed my passwords on every financial account, and opened new checking and savings accounts at a different bank. The protective measures felt both necessary and sad. I was essentially building a financial fortress to protect myself from my own family. My phone had been buzzing with calls and texts from my parents all day, but I hadn't answered any of them. I needed time to process what was happening and figure out how to move forward. When I finally got home to my new house, the place I had been so excited about just 24 hours earlier, I found Madison's car in my driveway, and Madison herself sitting on my front porch steps. She looked terrible. Her carefully styled hair was disheveled. Her makeup was smeared from crying, and she was wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt instead of her usual polished outfits. "Herbert," she said, standing up as I approached, "we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, walking past her toward my front door. "You committed fraud. Multiple times. There's no conversation that's going to change that." "Please," she said, following me. "Just give me 5 minutes. Let me explain." Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door and let her in. Madison looked around my new house with what appeared to be genuine admiration. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "You did such a good job choosing this place." "Thank you," I said carefully, wondering if this was some kind of manipulation tactic. Madison sat down on my couch and immediately started crying again. "I messed up," she said. "I messed up so badly, and I don't know how to fix it." "You can start by taking responsibility for what you did," I said. "No excuses, no justifications, no blaming other people or circumstances." "I used your information to get credit cards," Madison said quietly. "And I forged your signature on some applications. I know it was wrong." "What about the mortgage application?" I asked. Madison's face went even paler. "How did you find out about that?" "Madison," I said, sitting down across from her, "you tried to take out a loan against my house. You were planning to risk my home to pay for your debts and your down payment." "I wasn't going to let anything happen to your house," she said desperately. "I had a plan." "What plan?" I asked. "You have no income, no assets, and $28,000 in debt. What possible plan could you have had to repay an $85,000 loan?" Madison was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I was going to get married," she said. "Married?" I asked, confused. "To who?" "I've been dating someone for 3 months, Brian. He has a good job, makes 6 figures. I thought if we got engaged, he'd help me with the financial stuff." I stared at my sister in disbelief. "You were planning to trick some guy into marrying you to solve your debt problems." "It's not tricking," Madison protested. "I care about him, and he cares about me. He just doesn't know about the debt yet. Because you've been lying to him about your financial situation." "I've been protecting him from unnecessary stress," Madison said defensively. "Once we're married, we'll be a team. Couples share financial responsibilities." The delusion was staggering. Madison had built an entire fantasy around manipulating some innocent man into taking on her debt, and she genuinely seemed to believe this was a reasonable plan. Madison, I said carefully, do you understand that what you've done is illegal? Identity theft is a felony. Fraud is a felony. You could go to prison. But I won't, she said confidently, because you're going to help me fix this. No, I said firmly. I'm not going to help you fix this. You're going to fix this. You're going to get a job, any job, and you're going to work to pay back every penny you owe. Madison's expression changed from hopeful to angry. You're really going to let them arrest me? Your own sister. I'm not letting anyone do anything, I said. You made choices that led to this situation. The consequences of those choices are not my responsibility. Mom and Dad said you'd help, Madison said desperately. They said family helps family. Family doesn't commit fraud against family, I replied. Family doesn't steal identities and forge signatures and try to mortgage each other's houses. Madison stood up abruptly, her sadness replaced by fury. You've always been jealous of me, she said. You've always resented that Mom and Dad loved me more. The accusation hit me like a slap, not because it was true, but because it revealed so much about how Madison saw our family dynamic. I've never been jealous of you, I said quietly. But I have resented being treated like your personal bank account. Everything I did was because I was desperate, Madison said. I was scared and overwhelmed, and I thought family would understand. Understanding doesn't mean enabling, I said. Understanding doesn't mean letting you destroy my financial future to avoid the consequences of your choices. Madison pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. I'm telling Mom and Dad that you refused to help me, she said. I'm telling them you chose money over family. I chose my financial security over your financial irresponsibility, I corrected. There's a difference. Madison headed toward the door, then turned back to me with a look of pure venom. You're going to regret this, she said. When I'm in jail and Mom and Dad disown you, you're going to realize that money isn't worth losing your family. And when you're finally forced to take responsibility for your actions, I replied, you're going to realize that family isn't supposed to be built on fraud and manipulation. After Madison left, I sat in my new living room and tried to process what had just happened. For the first time in my adult life, I had refused to rescue my sister from the consequences of her choices. It felt both liberating and terrifying. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. First my mother, then my father, then extended family members who had apparently been recruited into Madison's campaign to pressure me into changing my mind. My cousin Jennifer called me crying, saying that Madison had told her I was trying to send her to prison over a misunderstanding. My Aunt Carol left a voicemail saying she was ashamed of me for abandoning family in their time of need. By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all of them urging me to drop the charges and work things out privately. The coordinated nature of the campaign told me that Madison had spent the afternoon spinning her version of events to anyone who would listen. In her version, I was the villain who was destroying the family over money. But as I looked around my house, the house I had worked for and saved for and earned through my own efforts, I realized that I was finally learning the difference between being part of a family and being a victim of one. For the first time in my life, I was putting my own well-being first. And while it felt scary and unfamiliar, it also felt like the beginning of something healthier than anything my family had ever offered me. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the conference room of Patricia's law office, surrounded by documents and facing the most difficult decision of my life. Across from me sat my parents, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen them. Madison was conspicuously absent. "Where's Madison?" I asked. "She's in the car," my mother said quietly. She was too upset to come in. Patricia had arranged this meeting as a last opportunity for my family to address the situation before the criminal investigation moved forward. Detective Martinez had gathered enough evidence to file formal charges, but she wanted to give me one final chance to see if a resolution was possible. "Herbert." My father began, his voice shaky. We need to talk about what's best for everyone here. What's best for everyone is for Madison to take responsibility for her actions, I said. We've been thinking, my mother said, and we have a proposal. She opened her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. We've spoken with Madison's friend Brian, the man she's been dating. He's a good person, very successful, and he cares about Madison. I felt a sense of dread building in my stomach. What does Brian have to do with this? He's offered to help, my father said. If you drop the criminal charges, Brian will pay off all of Madison's debts and help her get back on her feet. In exchange for what I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer, Madison has agreed to marry him, my mother said, as if this were a reasonable business transaction. He'll assume responsibility for her financial obligations, and you won't have to worry about being repaid. I stared at my parents in disbelief. You want Madison to marry someone to solve her debt problems? It's not just about the debt, my father insisted. They care about each other. This could be a fresh start for Madison. Does Brian know the full extent of Madison's financial situation? I asked. Does he know about the identity theft, the fraud, the mortgage applications? My parents exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. Madison has explained that there were some financial misunderstandings within the family, my mother said carefully. Misunderstandings, I repeated. Is that what we're calling felonies now? Patricia leaned forward. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I need to be very clear about something. Your son was the victim of multiple crimes. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. These aren't family disputes that can be resolved with marriage arrangements. But they can be resolved without destroying Madison's future, my father argued. If Herbert drops the charges and Brian assumes the financial responsibility, everyone wins. Everyone except Brian, I said, who's being manipulated into marrying someone who's lying to him about fundamental aspects of her character and situation. Madison isn't lying, my mother protested. She's just not sharing every detail of her past mistakes. Her past mistakes are ongoing federal crimes, Patricia said firmly. And they will continue to be crimes regardless of who pays the money back. I looked at my parents and saw desperation, denial, and a complete inability to acknowledge the seriousness of what Madison had done. In their minds, this was still just a family financial dispute that could be solved with the right arrangement. I want to talk to Madison, I said, face to face, right now. My father went to get Madison from the car, and she returned looking like she was walking to her own execution. She sat down next to my mother and refused to make eye contact with me. Madison, I said, tell me about Brian. What do you want to know? She asked quietly. I want to know if you love him or if you're using him. I care about him, she said defensively. That's not what I asked. Do you love him, or are you marrying him to solve your financial problems? Madison was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her honesty surprised me. I don't know, she admitted. I care about him, and I think I could love him eventually. And yes, marrying him would solve a lot of my problems. Have you told him about the identity theft? I asked. I told him we had some family financial issues, Madison said. Have you told him that you're facing potential federal charges? No. Have you told him that you've been unemployed for 6 months and have $28,000 in credit card debt? No. Have you told him that you tried to take out a loan against my house without my permission? No, Madison whispered. I turned to my parents. And you think this is an acceptable foundation for a marriage deception and financial manipulation? People work through problems together, my mother said. Once they're married, they'll figure it out. Brian deserves to know what he's getting into, I said. He deserves to make an informed decision about whether he wants to take on responsibility for Madison's debts and her legal problems. If you tell him everything he might not go through with the marriage, my father said. Exactly, I replied. And that would be his right. You can't manipulate someone into marriage by hiding the truth. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where Brian was presumably waiting in another car, completely unaware of the criminal investigation swirling around the woman he was planning to marry. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to face my family. I'm going to give you 1 week to tell Brian the complete truth about Madison's situation. Everything. The unemployment, the debt, the identity theft, the fraud charges, all of it. Herbert, please, Madison said, starting to cry again. If you tell him the truth and he still wants to marry you and assume responsibility for your debts, then we can discuss dropping the criminal charges. I continued. But only if he makes that decision with full knowledge of what he's taking on. And if we don't tell him, my father asked, then the criminal investigation continues and I'll tell Brian myself, I said. Because he has a right to know that he's being manipulated. My parents and Madison huddled together, whispering frantically. Patricia leaned over to me. This is actually a reasonable compromise, she said quietly. If this Brian person is genuinely willing to take financial responsibility for the debts after knowing the full truth, it could satisfy the restitution requirements and make criminal prosecution less likely. What if Madison just lies to him again? I asked. Then we proceed with the criminal charges, Patricia said. But you'll have given your family every possible opportunity to resolve this honestly. After 10 minutes of whispered conversation, my father spoke for the group. We agree to your terms, he said. 1 week to tell Brian everything. And I want proof that you've told him, I said. I want to meet with Brian myself to confirm that he understands the full situation. That's not necessary, my mother protested. It's absolutely necessary, I said firmly. Madison has been lying to him for months. I'm not going to trust that she's suddenly going to become honest now. Madison looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Why are you doing this to me? She asked. I'm not doing this to you, I said. I'm doing this for Brian and for myself. And maybe if you're willing to finally be honest about your situation, I'm doing it for you too. As my family prepared to leave, my mother turned back to me with one final plea. Herbert, she said, please remember that Madison is your sister. Whatever happens, that will never change. You're right, I said. Madison will always be my sister. But being family doesn't mean I have to enable her destructive behavior or sacrifice my own well-being to protect her from consequences. After they left Patricia, and I spent another hour discussing the legal implications of the arrangement, if Brian chose to assume Madison's debts with full knowledge of her situation, it would demonstrate that he wasn't being defrauded. If he chose to walk away, it would prove that Madison's deception was material to his decision-making. Either way, I had finally drawn a line in the sand. For the first time in my adult life, I was demanding that my family operate with honesty and integrity instead of manipulation and entitlement. The outcome was still uncertain, but the process had already changed me. I had learned that protecting myself wasn't selfish, that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, and that real love sometimes required refusing to participate in someone else's self-destruction. Now I just had to wait and see if my family was capable of learning those same lessons. 2 months later, I was sitting on the deck of my house, drinking my morning coffee, and watching the sun rise over the mountains in the distance. The view had been one of the main reasons I fell in love with this property, and I still felt a surge of gratitude every morning when I saw it. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian Martinez. Yes, the same Brian who had been dating Madison. After learning the full truth about her situation, he had indeed walked away from the relationship, but in an unexpected twist, he had reached out to me directly. Coffee this afternoon, his message read. I have an update about Madison that I think you'll want to hear. Brian and I had developed an unlikely friendship over the past 2 months. When I met with him to explain Madison's legal and financial situation, I expected him to be angry or hurt. Instead, he was remarkably pragmatic. I appreciate you telling me the truth, he had said. Madison is clearly struggling with some serious issues, and I hope she gets the help she needs. But you're right that I deserve to know what I was getting into. Brian was a financial advisor, and he understood better than most how devastating identity theft could be. He had offered to help me review my credit reports and set up monitoring services, and over time our professional relationship had developed into a genuine friendship. We met at a coffee shop near downtown, and Brian's expression told me he had significant news to share. Madison called me yesterday, he said without preamble. She wanted to update me on her situation. How is she doing? I asked, and I was surprised to realize that I genuinely cared about the answer. Better actually, Brian said. She's been working with a financial counselor and a therapist for the past 6 weeks. She's also got a job. This was news to me. My parents and I had barely spoken since the confrontation in Patricia's office, exchanging only brief polite conversations about practical matters. What kind of job? I asked. Customer service for an insurance company, Brian said. It's not glamorous, but it's full-time with benefits. She's making about $32,000 a year. That's a start. I said, though, I was doing mental math about how long it would take her to pay off $28,000 in debt on that salary. There's more, Brian continued. She's moved back in with your parents to save money, and she's been accepted into a debt management program. Her counselor helped her negotiate payment plans with all her creditors. I felt a mixture of relief and skepticism. Madison had made promises about changing her behavior before, usually right around the time consequences were about to catch up with her. What about the criminal charges? I asked. That's actually what she called to talk about, Brian said. She wanted to know if you'd be willing to meet with her. She's prepared to make formal restitution for the identity theft, and her attorney thinks the prosecutor might be willing to accept a plea agreement that includes counseling and community service instead of jail time. I considered this carefully. Detective Martinez had told me that first-time offenders in financial crimes cases often received probation and restitution orders rather than prison sentences, especially when there was evidence of genuine remorse and attempts at rehabilitation. She's really changed, I asked. She seems different, Brian said thoughtfully. More grounded, less entitled. She acknowledged that what she did to you was wrong, and she didn't try to make excuses or blame other people. That would be a first, I said. She also asked me to give you this, Brian said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside was a handwritten letter from Madison. Her handwriting was the same as it had been since childhood, but the tone was completely different from any communication I had ever received from her. Herbert. The letter began, I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I finally understand what I did to you. It wasn't just about the money or the credit cards. I violated your trust, endangered your financial future, and treated you like my personal safety net instead of my brother. The letter went on for 3 pages, detailing her recognition of the patterns of behavior that had led to the crisis. She acknowledged the years of financial support I had provided without appreciation, the entitlement she had felt to my resources, and the way she had manipulated our parents into enabling her destructive choices. I'm working to pay back every dollar I owe, she wrote. It's going to take me several years, but I have a plan and I'm sticking to it. More importantly, I'm learning to take responsibility for my own life instead of expecting other people to solve my problems. The letter concluded with something I had never received from Madison before, a genuine apology with no qualifications or justifications. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry for the years of taking advantage of your generosity. I'm sorry for the way our family treated you like you existed to serve my needs. You deserved better from all of us, and I hope someday I can prove to you that I've learned from my mistakes. I folded the letter carefully and looked up at Brian, who had been watching my reaction. She seems sincere, he said. But I understand if you're not ready to trust that yet. I'd like to meet with her, I said after a moment, but with conditions. 3 days later, Madison and I met at a neutral location, a small restaurant halfway between our houses. She looked different than she had during our previous encounters. Her clothes were simple and practical, her makeup minimal, and there was something in her posture that suggested a new kind of humility. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, and I could hear nervousness in her voice. "Thank you for the letter," I replied. It was honest. That's not something I'm used to from you. Madison winced slightly at the comment, but didn't argue with it. I know I have a lot to prove, she said. And I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough to undo the damage I caused. We spent the next 2 hours talking more honestly than we had ever talked before. Madison explained the therapy work she had been doing to understand her patterns of entitlement and manipulation. She described the humbling experience of taking a customer service job and learning to live within her means. The hardest part, she admitted, was accepting that I had to start over completely. No more designer clothes, no more expensive dinners, no more pretending I had money I didn't have. How are Mom and Dad handling all this? I asked. Madison's expression darkened slightly. They're struggling with it, she said. They want to help me financially, but my counselor has told them that enabling my behavior would undermine my progress. And they're listening to the counselor. Mostly, Madison said. Though Mom still tries to slip me money occasionally and Dad keeps offering to co-sign for a better apartment or a newer car. But you're saying no. I'm saying no, Madison confirmed. It's hard because part of me wants to accept their help. But I know that if I do, I'll just fall back into the same patterns. As our conversation continued, I found myself cautiously optimistic about Madison's apparent transformation. She spoke about her job with pride despite its modest pay, described her budget and savings plan in detail, and acknowledged the work she still needed to do to rebuild trust with our family. What do you need from me? I asked finally. I need you to know that I understand what family actually means, Madison said. It means supporting each other's growth, not enabling each other's weaknesses. It means celebrating each other's successes instead of treating them as resources to be exploited. She paused, gathering her courage for what came next. I'd like the chance to build a real relationship with you, she said. Not the old relationship where you gave me money and I took it for granted. A new relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care for each other's well-being. That's going to take time, I said. I know, Madison replied, and I'm prepared to do the work for as long as it takes. 6 months later, Madison successfully completed her debt management program and received a probationary sentence for the identity theft charges. She kept her customer service job and was eventually promoted to a supervisory position. She moved into her own modest apartment and slowly began rebuilding her financial independence. Our parents struggled more with the new family dynamic. They had difficulty accepting that their enabling behavior had been harmful, and they occasionally tried to revert to old patterns of giving Madison money or making excuses for her past behavior. But Madison held firm to her new boundaries, and gradually our parents began to understand that supporting her meant respecting her efforts to change. As for me, I discovered that protecting my boundaries didn't mean cutting off my family entirely. I learned to offer emotional support and encouragement while refusing to provide financial bailouts. I celebrated Madison's achievements in her new job and her progress in therapy while maintaining clear limits about what I would and wouldn't do to help her. My relationship with my parents slowly improved as well. Once they stopped expecting me to be Madison's financial safety net, we were able to develop more balanced adult relationships. They began to appreciate my achievements for their own sake rather than viewing them as resources for Madison's benefit. The house that had started this entire crisis became a symbol of the healthy boundaries I had learned to set. I loved coming home to a space that was truly mine paid for with my own work and sacrifice. I furnished it, gradually choosing pieces that reflected my tastes rather than buying things to impress other people. I also started dating seriously for the first time in years. Without the constant financial drain of Madison's crises, I had the resources and emotional energy to invest in building a relationship with someone who valued me for myself rather than my usefulness. Sarah was a teacher I met through a hiking group, and she was impressed by my integrity and strength rather than my willingness to solve other people's problems. When I told her the story of my family crisis, she said something that stuck with me. It takes courage to choose your own well-being when everyone around you is demanding that you sacrifice it. A year and a half after that confrontation in my parents' kitchen, I was hosting Thanksgiving dinner in my own home. Madison came with her new boyfriend, an accountant, who knew her complete financial history and loved her anyway. My parents brought side dishes and helped with the cooking, treating my house with the respect they had never shown my boundaries in the past. During dinner, Madison stood up to make a toast. "I want to thank Herbert," she said, "for loving me enough to refuse to enable my destructive behavior. It took me a long time to understand that saying no to my demands was actually the most caring thing you could have done." She paused, looking around the table at our small but healthier family. "I also want to thank him for showing all of us what it looks like to put your own well-being first. Not in a selfish way, but in a way that makes you strong enough to support the people you love." As I looked around my dining room table, I realized that I had gained something far more valuable than a house. I had gained a family that was built on mutual respect rather than financial obligation, on healthy boundaries rather than codependent manipulation. The crisis that had felt like the end of my family had actually been the beginning of a better one. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to save them from the consequences of their choices. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is demand that the people in your life treat you with the same care and respect you've always shown them. And sometimes the house you buy for yourself becomes the foundation for the life you actually deserve. I learned that true family love doesn't mean sacrificing your future for someone else's comfort. It means wanting the best for each other's growth, even when that growth requires facing difficult truths and uncomfortable consequences. My parents went crazy when I bought a house for myself instead of funding my sister's dreams. But in the end, that decision saved us all from a lifetime of unhealthy patterns and gave us the chance to build something better. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that protecting your own well-being isn't selfish. It's necessary for building healthy relationships with the people you love. Has anyone in your family ever expected you to sacrifice your own goals to fund their dreams? How did you handle setting boundaries with people who felt entitled to your resources? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family finances and finding the courage to put your own well-being first. And please share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Sometimes we all need to hear that it's okay to choose ourselves. Remember, the people who truly love you will respect your boundaries, not demand that you sacrifice your future for their comfort.